Hey bookworms, it's Jade from Bedtime Bookworm and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with my May reading wrap-up. I don't know about you guys, but May feels like it was ages ago for a lot of different reasons. I just had a really busy month. Initially because of good things. If you can't tell, our setup is a little bit different. I'm not sitting in the same place. I'll go into this more in my next reading vlog, but I got a new desk and I had to move stuff around my office a little bit, and so now we are on the opposite wall of where we were before. I also bought Animal Crossing like mid-May, and so I don't know, life's been a blur since then. And then there's been a few things in early April that have been difficult with everything going on with the Black Lives Matter movement. If you haven't seen my last video, then check that out to see where I stand on the issue. But also I had a pet death in the family. It wasn't one of my two dogs, but my parents' dog died very suddenly and tragically, and it's been really difficult to deal with. I'm still very much healing from that, and I'm not going to talk about it in this video. Instead, I'm here to talk about the things that I read, which, looking back on it, surprisingly was a lot more than I thought I had read. So I picked up a total of 6 books during the month of May. I say picked up because one of them sadly was a DNF, or a book that I chose not to finish because I wasn't enjoying it. My ratings were kind of like even across the board, a little bit swayed to the higher end, so this is how they played out. I had one book that I gave 2 stars, which is the one that I DNF'd. I had one book that I gave 3 stars, and then 2 books that I gave 4 stars, and 2 books that I gave 5 stars. So even though I had a DNF in the month of May, I still found some new favorites, and overall I would say it was a pretty good reading month. Out of these books, 3 of them were part of a series, so about half. I would like my percentage of books in a series to be a little bit higher than that moving forward. Not to mention that 2 of the 3 were not sequels, they were series starters, but that's okay. I don't regret it in the least. The books that I'm going to cover in this video include Starsight by Sanderson, which is the second book in the Skyward series, Home Before Dark by Riley Sager, which was an advanced reader copy that I got from NetGalley and the publishers in exchange for an honest review, House of Dragons by Jessica Cluess, which is the first book in a series. I'm not sure what the name of the series is off the top of my head. And this was also an advanced reader copy that I received from the publisher when I went to a book festival earlier this year. I also read Scythe by Neil Shusterman, which is the first book in the Arc of the Scythe series. We also have Saving Fish from Drowning by Amy Tan, and spoiler alert, that's the one that I DNF'd. And then I ended the month by reading another advanced reader copy that I got from NetGalley. It was Agnes at the End of the World by Kelly McWilliams. I will have timestamps in the description box, as I always do, so that you can jump to the books that you're most interested in hearing about. Typically, I would also say here that I have reading vlogs covering all of these books, and while I do have reading vlogs that cover some of them, I fell off the vlogging bandwagon towards the end of May, so I will link the vlogs that I do have that contain these books down below if you're interested. Alright, let's get started. So the first book that I finished in May was Starsight by Sanderson, which is, like I said, the second book in the Skyward series. This book is one of the Booktube SFF YA nominees, and that's why I read it. This is a YA science fiction book that I gave 4 out of 5 stars. In this sequel to Skyward, we get to see Spensa in a new environment, to try and leave it, fairly vague. And while I did very much enjoy this book, I didn't quite enjoy it as much as Skyward. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that we were in a new environment and with different characters. While I found all of that really interesting and fun, I just really missed some of the characters that we spent more time with in the first book. I think Spensa as a character continues to grow in this book, which is good because at the beginning of the series, I definitely found her a little bit annoying, but I also felt that that was done on purpose to give Spensa a lot of room for growth, and I think that she is growing. Spensa is one of those really spunky and impulsive characters and isn't always very thoughtful of how the things she does and says might affect other people. But I think that she is slowly but surely getting more mature as the series continues. I mean, we're only in book 2, and I believe it's going to be a 4-book series. Even though I missed some of the characters that we spent more time with in the first book, I still really appreciated the expansion of the world in this book. And there was definitely a lot more politics in this book than there were in the first one, and I really like reading political maneuverings and things in books, so that was really fun for me. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book, not quite as much as the first one, but I'm still very much interested in continuing on in the series, and I look forward to seeing what Spensa is up to next. The next book that I finished in the month of May was Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. As I mentioned, I did receive an advanced reader copy of this through NetGalley in exchange for an honest review. And I actually also did this as a buddy read with my friend Rachel from the Shades of Orange, which I will link below. She is a horror and SFF booktuber, so definitely go check her out if you like either of those genres. We had read Riley Sager's previous book, Lock Every Door, together, and that was such a fun reading experience that we wanted to recreate that with the newest Riley Sager book, and we luckily both were able to get our hands on early copies. Riley Sager tends to write thrillers that have like a dash of horror to them, so he's always kind of walking that line between the two genres, which are both genres that I really enjoy, so that is something that I like about his books. Granted, I've only read 2 of them so far. So Home Before Dark specifically is sort of inspired by the Amityville horror story. So it's about a woman who, when she was younger, like when she was like 5, her and her parents moved into this really old, dilapidated house that they got for a really good deal, and 2 weeks later, they packed up their stuff and left the house abruptly. There ended up being some news coverage of their sudden move, and it became like this nationwide sensational news story because her parents told the reporters that they left because the house was haunted. And from there, her father, who was a writer, goes on to write a book about their experience living in the haunted house, and that becomes a bestseller. So the main character has grown up kind of in the shadow of this book that her father wrote, and people who meet her associate her with the book. However, the main character herself doesn't remember anything from the 2 weeks that they were in this house. So there are basically 2 timelines in this book. You have the present day timeline of this woman as an adult. Her father has passed away and she has inherited this house from him. She is a house flipper, so she decides to return to that house and to do repairs and sell it for a profit. But then every other chapter is actually a chapter from the book that her father wrote. And I have to say that those chapters were my favorite chapters out of this book. They were just like really creepy and, they read like a haunted house story, which is something that I enjoy reading. I also thought Riley Sager did a really great job of having kind of a different authorial voice when he was writing the chapters that were supposed to be from the main character's dad's book. This was also such a fun book to buddy read because there were just a lot of kind of like twists and turns and red herrings and things that were really fun to discuss with Rachel as we were going through. And I have to admit that I didn't really guess what was going on until the end of the book. Not that that's something that I'm good at by any means, but I love that Riley Sager had me guessing until the very last page. I had so much fun reading this book that I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. This one is actually not out yet. It comes out on June 30th, and I highly recommend it. The next book that I finished in the month of May was House of Dragons by Jessica Cluess. I did have an advanced reader copy of this book that I received when I went to the North Texas Teen Book Festival earlier this year. This is a YA high fantasy that I thought was a lot of fun. In my vlogs, I kind of pitched this book as like a mix between Game of Thrones and The Hunger Games. I don't know if everybody will agree with me on that comparison, but I still stand by that. So this book has 5 main characters. They are basically all from different royal families in this world, and what has happened is that the emperor of this kingdom or whatever has died, and when that happens, one child from each of the main royal families has to compete to become the next emperor. I definitely feel the story was a little on the cutthroat side, and that's kind of what reminded me of Game of Thrones. And there's some political maneuvering and various houses that are all vying for the throne. But it was also reminded me a little bit of Hunger Games because the child that is picked out of each family happens a little bit, not randomly, there's like a higher power that chooses them, but you don't always know who's gonna get chosen. So there was that sort of element to it, and it is a competition kind of to the death. Like, they aren't expected to kill each other during the competition, but it's understood that after a winner is chosen, the rest of the competitors will die. So that's where I'm drawing those similarities to Game of Thrones and Hunger Games. I gave this book 4 stars. I had a really good time reading it. My main complaint is that I just felt like it was a little bit surface level for me. I think that has a little bit to do with the number of POVs. Like I said, there are 5 of them, which generally I enjoy having a lot of POVs. But I think it works a little better in adult fantasy or adult sci-fi, where you can write a lot longer books compared to YA. I just felt like the characters, the world, the plot, all of it lacked a little complexity that I enjoy seeing in books. But I did think that the world was interesting, and my favorite part about this world, of course, is that there are dragons. So the title doesn't just have the word dragons in it just to dangle that in front of us. There are actually dragons in this book, and I really liked the dragons. Basically, each character has a dragon companion, and they were kind of like pets, maybe kind of along the lines of horses. But they all have different personalities, and there were a lot of different kinds of dragons and stuff. I think we will learn a lot more about the dragons in the next book, and I'm really excited about it. I am intrigued by the way that this ended, and I, at this point, definitely plan to continue on in the series. The next book that I finished in the month of May was Scythe by Neil Shusterman. This is the first book in the Arc of the Scythe series, and this one was kind of a spur-of-the-moment decision to read. I had previously checked out the physical copy from my library in anticipation of it possibly making the Booktube SFF shortlist for YA. I mean, the last book in the series would have been the one to make the list, but it did not. And so I didn't think I was going to read it, but then I saw that Angela from Literature Science Alliance, I will link her channel down below, she was reading it, and I had it in my hands, and I was like, you know what, I think I want to read this with you if you'll have me, which she kindly said yes. So we did a buddy read for this book, and it was a lot of fun. I gave this book 5 stars. I really enjoyed reading Scythe, and I'm very much excited about reading the rest of the series. I'm totally on the hype train for this series and this book. I recognize that it is very hyped already, and I hate to add to that, but it worked for me. I really enjoyed it. So if you don't know what this series is about, it's set in a future world of ours where we have created this artificial intelligence called the Thunderhead that has solved all of the world's problems, and now nobody ever dies. And because of that, we need some sort of population control. So there is this society of scythes created. So these scythes, they go around and kill people to help maintain the population. So this book centers around 2 young adults who have been chosen to be apprentices to a scythe, and the story goes from there. I found this world really interesting, although Angela definitely pointed out a really big plot hole in this world that I hadn't really considered. But the idea of birth control is never talked about in this book, and obviously that is another form of population control. I was kind of surprised when reading this that the deaths aren't always like not violent. I guess I'd kind of thought that Scythe just went around handing out suicide pills or something, but each scythe gets to decide who dies in their own way and also how they die in their own way. So each scythe kind of has like different ways that they decide those things, but when you're an apprentice, you have to learn basically how to kill people in lots of different ways. So they're trained in like martial arts and swordcraft and poisons, and in some ways reminded me a little bit of like learning how to be an assassin without the like sneaky element to it. And that's something that I wasn't expecting from this book, but really enjoyed. I thought this book was pretty fast paced. It was really hard to put down, and I really enjoyed the ending of the book, and I'm very excited to continue on in the series. Spoiler alert, I already checked out the second book from my library. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I do actually have all 3 of these books now on audiobook. I had previously purchased Scythe on audiobook because I had heard that it was a good audiobook. I totally agree. I really enjoyed this narrator, and after I finished it and I knew I wanted to continue on in the series, I went ahead and purchased the other 2 audiobooks for the other 2 books in the series. Unfortunately, these are Audible exclusives, which I hate, so the only way to listen to them is to buy them through Audible. The next book that I finished or didn't finish in the month of May was Saving Fish from Drowning by Amy Tan. I was reading this because it was a book club book for my work book club. I had actually nominated it because actually now that I think about it, the reason why I nominated it for my work book club was because it was a TBR jar pick for me. I do own a physical copy of this, but I saw that the audiobook version of it was available on Scribd, so I did listen to most of it. I got excited because it's narrated by Amy Tan herself, but I can't say that she's like a great narrator. Like, I thought she did okay, but overall I just really didn't like the content of this story. It kind of has a strange history because Amy Tan wrote this book based on her conversations with a medium who claims to have spoken with this dead Chinese woman, and this is her story. Amy Tan also did do some of her own research about the things that happened in the story or about this woman that it's about, but it's kind of like a mix of what she found out from the medium and what she did her research on. But the story is also told from the point of view of this ghost. And that's where things were kind of rough for me. It was because of the way the story was told. And I think that has to do with the fact that it's told from the point of view of a ghost. It's very rambly. I mean, it's very character focused. So people who really enjoy that might enjoy this book. I do sometimes like really character-driven books, but I have to really like the characters, and I can't say that I really liked any of the characters in this book because they were all kind of terrible people. Maybe not all, but also just not a lot happened. There is what I thought was supposed to be kind of like a mystery story about the disappearance of a group of people who were on like this international tour thing in China. I thought that mystery thread would help pull me through the story, but honestly, I got to, I think, halfway, 50%, maybe 40% through the book, and I got to the point where I just didn't care what happened to these people or why they disappeared. So yeah, I really didn't enjoy this book. I thought it was really boring. I didn't like the characters. I thought the narrative style was very rambly and just didn't have any direction. And yeah, I decided to DNF it, even though it was my pick for book club. I'm definitely not giving up on Amy Tan. I've read Joy Luck Club by her when I was very young, but I really enjoyed it. And there were multiple reviews of Saving Fish from Drowning that said like this was like their least favorite Amy Tan book. So I definitely plan to read more Amy Tan in the future. Let me know in the comment section if you have a favorite Amy Tan book, because maybe that'll help me figure out where I want to go next with her. And then the last book that I finished in the month of May was Agnes at the End of the World by Kelly McWilliams. This was another advanced reader copy that I got from NetGalley. This is a YA I guess science fiction, post-apocalyptic kind of book. And I ended up giving this book 3 stars. This is a book that, for me, had a really strong beginning, but the last half of the book went in a direction that I didn't totally love, and there were a few other things that I'll talk about that I didn't love, but I was kind of disappointed because it definitely started out really strong for me. So this story is about Agnes, who is, I don't know, 16 or 17, and she has grown up in a super conservative, polygamist religious cult, which I found really fascinating. Agnes has a really big secret. Her younger brother has type 1 diabetes, and she has had to secretly meet with people from the outside to get insulin from them to control his diabetes, and she also has had to keep all of that a secret from her family because their religion doesn't really believe in medicine, and they think that like if you're sick it's because God wants you to be sick. So I found all of that really fascinating. And then on top of that, what happens is a pandemic breaks loose. So I realized that not everybody is going to want to read books about a pandemic right now, but I enjoyed reading that even in the midst of what is going on, and by that I'm referring to the pandemic. So that brings me to the things that I didn't love about the book. First, I want to say that there is a fantastical element to this book, which in general, I would say is a good thing for me, but it did not work for me in this one. The book takes a very religious turn, and that's just not something that I really enjoy reading in books, and I have a harder time suspending my disbelief for that. I don't really know. So it's very heavy on the religious stuff, and if that's not something you mind reading in your books, then maybe you will enjoy that. I also was kind of let down by the pandemic part of it. At first it sounded really interesting, but it ended up being not really that scary of a virus. It wasn't the virus I was wanting. Not that I needed to be like a zombie virus, and it was killing people, but yeah, it was not as fun of a virus as what I was wanting. So I was a little disappointed with that. And then also some of the romance things, it was a little insta-lovey. And one of the characters, I guess I should say there's two main characters. In addition to Agnes, you also get point of views from her younger sister, Beth. And I really struggled with Beth. She just was really wishy-washy and like kept changing her mind about things a lot, and I didn't really like that. So while this book had a really strong start for me, the second half of it definitely let me down. I didn't hate it. It was just okay. It's not necessarily a book that I would recommend for people who have similar tastes to me, and that's why I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Alright guys, those are the 6 books that I picked up in the month of May. Let me know down in the comment section if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, although I realize some of them were early copies, so also let me know what your favorite book that you read in the month of May was. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more bookish content. That is all I have for now. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bookworms, keep reading. Bye. This is a YA so it's about oh my god, I've been talking for way too long. I hate how I'm talking about this right now. Let me know in the comment section what